Greetings everyone, I am Avisha Peters from the Department of Psychology, the Bhopal School of Social Sciences, and here I am with another lecture on sensation, the basics. Now first let's get to know what sensation actually is. Sensation basically refers to the process of detecting external stimuli and transmitting this information to the brain. For example, you are watching this video right now. So what's happening? Your eyes are picking up the information that you're seeing on the screen, the colors, the picture of the brain, the globe, and your eyes are then transforming this raw data into neural signals that your brain can interpret, and then these signals will be sent to your brain. This is basically one example of sensation. Similarly, sensation happens in from your other 5 sense organs as well, which we'll look later down the line. Now coming on to the slide, understanding sensation is crucial in psychology, as it forms the foundation of how we perceive and interact with the world around us. What is psychology? Psychology is basically a study of mind and behavior. But what constitutes the main part of behavior? The information that you receive from the surroundings. For example, would you have a reason to run from a snake if you don't see the snake in the first place? So you could say that whatever you sense from the surroundings plays a crucial role on how you behave. One good example of this would be that the behavior of, let's say, a blind man who is deprived of his sensation of the eyes would be vastly different from the behavior of, let's say, you, who has their visual still intact. Now moving on. Now here we come to the sensory system. So the sensory system consists of sensory organs that detect stimuli from the environment and transmit this information to the brain for processing. Here in this picture you can see 5 sense organs, but recent research has shown that there could be sense organs as much as 8. With further research it might even increase up to 10 or 12. But first let's focus on to the basic 5 sense organs. So first you have the sight, that is your eyes. Next you have your hearing, that is your ears. Third you have the touch, that is your whole skin. Your hands, your arms, basically your whole body is covered with skin, and sensitivity differs from place to place. For example, your hands, especially your fingertips, are supposed to be the most sensitive part of your human body, and places where it's not such required, like your back for example, it's not that sensitive. Basically there are not as many neurons present as it might be present here on your fingertips. Next you have taste. That means the main sense organ responsible for taste is your tongue. And how does the tongue do that? Through your taste buds. Your tongue has several taste buds which basically contains these receptors which are able to detect different flavors of whatever food you eat and then send these signals onto the brain. And finally we come to the smell, that is basically olfactory sense, and it is done mainly through your nose. Your nose is in fact one of the most sensitive sense organs and also very crucial for survival. Can you imagine our ancestors who used to live in the caves would survive if they didn't have intact smell to differentiate between appropriate food and rotten food? Probably not. All of them would have died from food poisoning. So that is why smell is really crucial for your survival. All the sense organs are in fact. Now each sensory organ has specialized receptors. Eyes for example have rods and cones, which we will look later down the line when we cover visual sensation. Similarly your ears also has special receptors which we will cover further down the line when we talk about hearing sensation. Now let's look at the 5 sensations in detail, although we have already looked into it quite a lot. So first is of course light, that comes under the domain of your visual sense or simply vision. So basically perception of light is done through the eyes and processing of visual information by the brain. So your eyes basically they have this part here that's called as the cornea. Through this all the light enters and the light is projected onto the retina. You will learn this later in the detail down the line. And from there these neural signals are sent onto the brain and you are able to understand what you are seeing around you. Next comes hearing, which we also call as the audition. So it is basically the perception of the sound waves. all the sounds that you're listening right now, they basically travel through the air, through waves. And imagine a lake or a pond, drop a pebble onto it, creates waves in the lake. That's exactly how your sound waves also work, and that is why you cannot hear anything in space, because there is no air there. Now moving on is touch, or your tactile sensation, basically these, your skin. So it's basically the perception of pressure, temperature and pain through the skin, and processing of tactile information by the brain. Your touch is not just concerned with the, let's say, the texture or how this surface feels like. It is also quite important for detection of temperature or pain. For example, let's say there is a fire placed in front of you. Let's say you're cooking on a stove. Accidentally you touch the fire. Immediately you will withdraw your hand, right? Let's say if you did not have this sensation of touch, what would happen? You will not feel any heat, and you will not withdraw your hand because you are not able to feel any pain. And so inevitably you might end up burning or damaging your hand without you even realizing it. Next comes taste or gustation. So basically this consists of perception of chemicals on the tongue and processing of taste information by the brain. So let's say this is your tongue here, and your tongue is divided into different regions. Some regions, for example, detect salty taste, some regions detect bitter taste, some regions detect sweet taste. There is no as such taste buds for spice, surprisingly. For that there is a different mechanism which we will explore later down the line in one of the other videos. So in these regions we have these small taste buds, and these taste buds have receptors which are able to perceive the chemicals on the tongue and process the taste and send the information to the brain. And now finally you have smell or olfaction. So it is basically perception of airborne molecules through the nose and processing of the smell information by the brain. For example, I want right now to all of you to take a deep breath. What are you able to smell? Is there something sweet or nice coming from the kitchen, or is there something very dirty coming from outside the window? This is basically done by your nose. And of course, our sense of smell is not always intact. Certain conditions can affect our sense of smell. Cold, for example, because your mucus gets clogged up and your the molecules are not able to register inside the nostrils. Now moving on. Now let's talk some little things about psychophysics, where we mainly deal with a combination of psychology and physics components together. One of these is sensory thresholds. So sensory threshold basically refers to the minimum amount of stimulus energy required for detection of the minimum noticeable difference between the two stimuli. Let's say you currently have a glass of water, right? This is a glass of water, and I add 1 grain of sugar into this. Take a sip from this glass of water. Are you able to taste anything? Probably not. I add another grain of sugar here. Take a sip again. Probably not. You will not perceive anything here. Now I will add one more, and again I will keep on doing this until finally you will detect the faintest hint of sweetness in the water. This is your absolute threshold. So absolute threshold is basically the minimum stimulus intensity needed for detection by a sensory system. Maybe your absolute threshold for sweetness is let's say 20 grains of sugar. You need to put 20 grains of sugar in a glass of water for you be able to detect that yes, this glass is sweet. Now let's say I have put 20 grains of sugar in this glass. I add one more. Then I ask you to drink this glass of water, and I question you, do you think that this glass of water is more sweeter than before? And you say, no, not really, it tastes the same. I am like, okay, let's add one more grain of sugar. I keep doing this, keep adding sugar until finally you will say, yes, now I detect a change in the sweetness of water, and this is your difference threshold. So difference threshold is basically your just noticeable difference, where we are able to notice the smallest difference from before and after. That yes, this glass of water is more sweet now. Oh yes, this painting on the wall is now more darker. oh yes, this shade has changed its color. So just remember the difference between these two, absolute threshold and difference threshold, because a lot of students make mistake here. Absolute threshold is all about detecting the new stimulus, and difference threshold is all about detecting change in the stimulus. That's the difference. Now here's an example for you. The faintest sound a person can hear, or the smallest change in brightness that can be perceived. Which is which? This is a small homework for you. Now we come on to the next topic that comes under sensation, and that is sensory adaptation. Imagine you are, let's say, studying for your exam. You are, let's say, studying on a laptop. Suddenly the electricity goes away. Now suddenly the light from your laptop is too bright, and you are like, it's stinging your eyes. But eventually you grow used to it, and eventually you are able to study with no difficulty. This is your sensory adaptation, where your senses, your sensory receptors basically become used to the repeated exposure that is happening. Or simply speaking, your sensory receptors become less responsive to constant or unchanging stimulus over the time. Look at this picture here, this person sleeping. Maybe just imagine that this person was, let's say, studying for the exam, and the person is like, okay, I have done enough studying, I will take a nap on the table. But there's a lot of loud noise now coming from the kitchen. Maybe the mother is making some chutney. For the first 10-20 minutes, the sound will keep on coming and coming, and he will be very annoyed and disturbed because this sound is disturbing him. But eventually his senses, specifically in this case his hearing senses or his ear, will get used to this and would become less responsive to the sensation of the audio that's coming from the kitchen. And because of this, the person would, like, just be able to easily fall asleep. Now why is this sensory adaptation so important? Imagine if you are able to hear all the sounds that are coming from your surroundings. You are able to see all the surroundings. For example, let's say you're driving a car. If your sensory system is able to pick up each and every tiny sound, you will never be able to drive a car carefully. You would basically, your sensory system would become overloaded. And that is why this system is very important, so that you can detect and respond accordingly to a novel stimuli. For example, would you really be able to respond to a loud horn or a car coming to your way if you're already preoccupied with the other sensations around you? No, you will not be. And that is why the sensory adaptation is so important. Now here's an example, adjusting the temperature of a swimming pool after initially feeling cold water. It's the summers now, at least here in this part of the country, and let's say you wake up in the morning and the geyser is not working. You need to take a shower though before you go to your school or your college. You start the shower and the water comes out very cold. For the first 5 minutes you will probably dance around in the shower room, not really getting accustomed to the cold water, but eventually you will get used to it, and eventually you will be able to complete your bath and get ready for college. This is happening because of sensory adaptation. Your senses just became used to the constant sensation of the cold water. Now we come to sensory processing. So what is sensory processing? Basically it happens in the brain, where your sensory information is received, interpreted and organized into perceptions. Basically it's because of this that your sensation is able to become a perception. Now what's the difference between the two? Sensation is basically the raw information, the raw data you are getting from your sense organs of the around the world. For example, what you are seeing on the screen is going to your eyes, and that is the sensory information. But are you able to understand this information? How do you interpret this information? How do you organize this information? That is perception. So different brain regions are responsible for processing information from different sensory modalities. For example, here you can see this part of the brain, which we call the parietal lobe, is responsible for touch and pressure. Similarly, here your frontal lobe is responsible for your smell. We also have an olfactory bulb here which is responsible for your smell here. Now coming on to perception, perception differs for all individuals, it is quite subjective. For example, here look, here is this girl here and this old man standing, they are seeing a digit that could be 6 or 9 depending on where they are standing. And that is how sensation and perception might differ. Sensation might be objective for all, but how you perceive that sensation is subjective, it is different for all of us. Now, what factors influence sensation? There are several factors that influence your sensation. First of all is attention, right here. If you are not able to, let's say, pay attention to this screen for example right now, which I hope you are not doing that, would you be able to really perceive or sense the images or the words that I am hearing? No, you will not be able to do it. So, the first step of sensation is paying attention to a specific stimuli. And then comes expectation. Basically, expectation is a preconceived notion or beliefs that shape your perception of the stimuli. For example, let us say you are playing a video game. You were just now beaten by this big boss standing here. The next time you fight this boss, your sensations would be more alert and more sensitive towards whatever moves this boss is playing. Why did this happen? Because now you already have certain expectations regarding how this boss would move and fight with you. And finally, context. Context means surrounding circumstances that influence how your stimuli are perceived. For example, if you are, let's say, driving alone in a very lonely road, there your sensations might be highly alert because you are all alone there with no one to help you. And if you are in a very crowded area, maybe you are more relaxed there because if anything goes wrong, you have people around to help you out. We have already covered this, but I will just take a small note here. Look at this image here. How do you see this image? Some of you might say, oh, it's a fingerprint. Some of you might say it's, let's say, abstract art. And that is exactly the difference between sensation and perception. Your sensation would pick this up just as a bunch of lines, but your brain would process this sensation, interpret it and give you a subjective perception regarding this image. Now quickly moving on to the next slide. And we come to the end of this lecture with the last topic, that is where do we apply these sensations? The application of sensations is all around you, especially in your advertising industry. Let's just take one example of a social media. Why do you think the social media, especially the reel concept of Instagram, is so smooth and flows so easily? Because it is designed to be addictive to your senses. It basically keeps giving you these small doses of dopamine that make you use that program again and again, because it knows how to play with your senses that well. Besides that, we also have this use in neurosciences, in design and of course in marketing. And with that we come to the end of this lecture. I hope you have got to learn something about sensation. This is Avisha Peters signing off.